Well, good evening, everyone. This is Alan Williams, and welcome to Understanding Ag's ongoing webinar series. We are very honored to have each of you join us this evening. We have an outstanding presentation for you this evening from our own Understanding Ag's own Alejandro Correa. And Alejandro is the owner of the Las Damas Ranch in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. And this evening, Alejandro is going to be presenting information relative to what we call greening the desert. So he's going to be talking specifically about what he has done relative to utilizing adaptive grazing practices and principles to be able to restore vitality and viability to the Chihuahuan desert. We would ask that everyone please mute yourselves so that we don't have any background noise. We will take questions at the end of the presentation tonight. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box available to you at the bottom of your Zoom meeting screen, and we will address those questions this evening, or as many as we can get to. So again, it is our pleasure to present Alejandro Correa and his webinar this evening, Adaptive Grazing in the Chihuahuan Desert. So Alejandro, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present some of the work that we have done down in the Chihuahuan Desert in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico. I really appreciate the opportunity. To give you a little bit of background, I joined the ranching operation back in 2004. My father asked me to help him with the ranch. He was already 70 years old. And yeah, I said, let's do it. I spent a lot of my summers at the ranch. And I know how the ranchers used to work in the desert. So I really enjoy spending some of my summers there, but I really did not enjoy going through a drought after a drought. So I was very fortunate to meet some people practicing holistic management in Chihuahua who were all actually my mentors. And in 2006, I took my first holistic management training. And then we went from there, learning from holistic management and learning from many people that were and are the experts on that field. So let's start the presentation because we have some material to cover today. So the ranch is actually nested in the Chihuahuan Desert in Chihuahua, right where the S is. That's where the ranch is seasonal rain. Let me give a little bit of the context of the ranch. This is the ranch. The name is Las Damas Ranch. And that's the perimeter. As you can see on this slide, we have three kinds of terrains. One is like the flatlands. There are the hills or malpais here. And there's a big sierra in the middle. And we treat them differently, and you'll see. You will see through this presentation how we handle those different terrains. More on the context of the ranch. So it's a 30,000 acre ranch. We're running about 600 cows at the ranch, plus all the heifers, bulls, and steers, and so on, and calves. Our average rainfall, well, based on the records on the last 15 years that I've been keeping it, is 10.5 inches per year. But the last 3 years, we have a below average rainfall of 8. This year has been particular very difficult year, as we only have a couple of inches so far average the ranch since January. And we give no inputs to the cows. Originally, when I joined the ranch, we spent a lot of money on inputs during the drought season, which was probably like 4 or 5 months. Nowadays, we only use sea salt. We have not used any chemical, mechanical, or seeding to restore the native grasslands. And the tool we use is actually holistic management, or cows rationally managed. And in Chihuahua, we are part of a network that actually nowadays is over 1 million acres. There's quite a few people practicing this regenerative ranching right now. So this is the rainfall pattern. Actually, it's very seasonal. We are getting most of the rain in 3 months, July, August, and September. And the thing here is that whatever grass we grow on those 3 months have to last for the next 10 to 12 months in order for us to get to the next rainy season with no inputs or minimal inputs. If you see this picture, this is a typical view of the Chihuahuan Desert. Unfortunately, if we take a deeper look at this picture, we see like well, actually I took this picture like a month ago. Things are now actually more difficult because we did not get any rain in August. September has been a little bit of rains, but very sporadic in just certain places in Chihuahua. But what you can see here is because of the lack of management, we've been degrading the land. Even if you see the mesquites there, they're also dying. So what we have to do is to bring all those bales, otherwise those cows would be pretty much dead by now. And it's not only all the issues and all the degradation that is taking place in our own ranches, but also we are promoting the opening of more farmland by putting bales, by using bales as the input. So we need to break that vicious circle. And this is a property that is nearby my ranch, on my way to my ranch. On my way to my ranch, also you have this situation there where there's a lot of erosion, and you may say, well, yeah, with 10 inches, 8 inches, that's gonna take a while to provoke that erosion. But actually, this kind of damage was on only, it took only 50 years to do this, all this degradation. Just for you to see, there's a fence hanging in there that it wasn't actually built 50 years ago. So it's really amazing if we continue doing this set stocking or continuous grazing, how much degradation can take place in such a low rainfall area. Now, a closer look at that, you can see all that organic matter that is still there, that is telling us that there used to be grasslands on that specific place, which is very hard to believe nowadays. So what we actually found out is that there's really no middle ground here. When we say, okay, yeah, we're the same as 10 years ago, no, we are not the same. Whatever we're doing in our management is going to take us forward or backwards. And that actually ties a lot with the understanding of the natural processes and our management. So just keep in mind, folks, that whatever you're doing is taking you into a virtuous circle or is taking you down to a vicious circle, because we're working with nature. So one of our mindsets is to always fight nature. I think we need to actually listen more to what nature is telling us. And in this particular case is in my ranch, in the family's ranch, and you can see all these creosote of woody plants. And one of the first approaches that we have when we see that is, oh yeah, we need to kill the mesquite, or we need to kill the woody plants, because those are invasive and they are displacing the grass. I don't see it that way. I see it like we mismanaged the place, and then we actually overgrazed and overrested the grasses, and eventually killing all the grasses. And nature is always trying to help us. If we don't see it or we don't see it, if we see it or we don't see it, so nature is going to send something that we will not be able to overgraze or kill. In this case, nature was sending me this creosote and some other of these woody plants, trying to cover the soil, because natural way is to have some skin in the soil. Now, the issue here with this creosote is that it doesn't know how to read the book, because it was not supposed, we were not supposed to have grass between the creosote. So when we started managing that specific spot, we did not have any grass. So here the message is, you have to manage for what you want and just ignore the rest. Because whatever you have right now is helping you somehow do some photosynthesis, keeping the soil, keeping at least part of the soil covered. The next picture is again in my ranch. And if you see how the grass is so aggressive when we work towards having more perennial grasses, you see there a woody plant that is dying right in the middle. So we just manage for having more perennial grasses, more diversity of perennial grasses, we will see that your place is going to just balance between these, in this case, mesquite and the grasses. So yeah, let's stop fighting nature. I put this picture because this is my dad. And we were surprised to have this sprangletop grass at the ranch. It was not supposed to be there. Remember, we did not seed anything. So I put my dad there. He's like 6 feet tall, because one of the first times that one of my mentors, Jesus Almeida, went to the ranch, he told me something that was very, very profound to me. He said, okay, Alex, your ranch is very degraded, but something is going to happen very good for you. And I asked Jesus, what is it? This is going to, whatever you do now, from now on, applying holistic management, is going to give more years of life to your dad. Oh man, he was so right about it. My dad is now 87 years old. Every time he goes to the ranch, he's so excited as having a candy for our kid. So he actually, yeah, that's something we always think, oh yeah, I want to have more cattle at a lower cost and so on. But the family ties, community ties, social ties is just amazing when you start doing this regenerative ranching. Let's take a virtual tour to the ranch and surrounding areas. So you can try to compare, because I think we as ranchers are pretty bad documenting things. We're always busy. So let's just imagine that we're taking a road, a 40-mile dirt road to the ranch. And this is one of the properties last year that we hit. And last year, at that time in summer, we had 6 inches of rain, accumulated rain year to date. I mean, from January to that specific day. Now, on exactly the same day with the same precipitation, we jump into my ranch. And that's how the ranch looked like. I mean, think about it. Let me go back a little bit. Same day and same day. That's what Alan said would call effective rainfall. I mean, it's not how much rain you get, it's what you do with that rain. I also have this on a different day in spring. Remember, we don't really have that much snow in spring, so we don't really have that spring flush that some of you may have. Because when the last rains, which may be in October, that's pretty much it, and you have to wait until the next July, August, September. So same deal, same day on these pictures going through those 40 miles. So on the upper left, you have the first spot that I hit, which is continuous grazing. You see even the mesquite is dying, all the, on the upper left, all the soil that has been lost. And I mean, that means poverty, migration, conflict. That's equivalent of that's how I perceive that. The next one, though, on the upper right is another property which is doing rotational grazing. Large pastures in well, a few cattle or some cattle. So there is too much overgrazing and overrested individual grasses. The bottom part is when I reach my ranch. If you see even just looking at the color of the grass, is just it tells you a story. The mesquites are in symbiosis with the grasses as well. I think one of the most important and challenging things that we have is being consistent year in and year out. Being consistent in your land and being consistent in your genetics. This is another comparative picture, but this is actually on one of the neighboring properties. If you see, we're also in spring of last year, and the inner side is my ranch, and the outer side is one of my neighbor's ranches. We got the same rain. Actually, he's carrying a third of the cattle that I'm running on a per acre basis. So a lot of people just get into this discussion of, oh yeah, we need to minimize, we need to lower the cattle numbers because that's the issue. That's not the issue. I mean, the issue is how you manage that cattle. And you can see a big difference with the same rainfall here. Now we go to the same spot in summer, and now you see the production of grasses on the right side, which is my ranch on the left side. I like this picture because it looks like a changing season, but it's not a changing season. The left side is a nearby property on a more light rotational grazing, meaning, let's say, 1,000-acre paddocks. The cattle stay there for a month and then they move it. And on the right side is my ranch on the same day. I mean, I just took the picture on the same day. My paddocks are much smaller, about 40 acres average. And we put all the cattle there for a small amount of time. So the issue here also, I mean, the challenge here is that people on the left side are still want more rain and more rain. And actually, we don't really need much rain. I remember when I joined the ranch in 2004, we got 20 inches of rain in a 10-inch average region. We did not do much because we were just very conventional grazing. We lost a lot of soil. And I think that right now I only need 4 inches of rain to get enough productivity or enough grass grow to take me to the next year with minimal inputs or no inputs. Last year, we had these very late rains, and we were obviously concerned. And what happened is that when you work your place, when you work the soil, the grasses and everything, even though it just rained till September, we were able to actually get most of the grass, like 80% of the grass, in shape to take us to this year. This is a closer look at the grasses in winter. This is the same species of grasses. I mean, the left side is Itobosa, the right side is Itobosa. I actually asked some people from the academia to tell me what kind of grasses were these. So they were able to identify the grass on the right. They would say, oh yeah, that's Tobosa. And I say, so which grass is the one on the left? And they say, well, we don't know. So a lot of the knowledge we have is on a very conventional grazing. But you can see that even the leaf to stem ratio changes a lot on the same species based on how you're doing your grazing. It's just a big difference. And remember that cattle can thrive and can survive on a good quality grass. So it's not only the biomass that we have, it's what is the quality of that biomass that we have. Closer look. I mean, obviously what is on the top is going to be at the bottom. So the left side is that very light rotational grazing. The right side is on our ranch, taking the same, obviously on the same day. And you can see that on the left side, the grass is dying. The root system is pretty shallow. And I was able to pull the whole thing with my hands. On the right side, obviously I was not able to pull because the root system was very well developed. So what I learned there is with very conventional grazing or perennial grasses actually behave and look like annual grasses. Their green season is pretty short, their root system is very shallow, and so on. And the nutritional value is actually very low for the cows. So all of these changes have brought a lot of growth and diversity of the wildlife at the ranch. We took this with a trail camera, and last year we see substantial increase on the wildlife. We are also partners with some bird organizations, and they're seeing very good results, specifically in the migratory birds that are coming from Southern Canada and Northern US, and they spend the winter at the ranch. So what is it that we have such a big difference in these properties that are in the same region? And there you have the cow manure, cow pie. That's a small microclimate that promotes grasses. I mean, the growth of grasses. It holds a lot of water, and what we're striving to do is to put as many manure as close as possible. This is an example of a manure that has been put into the soil by the dung beetles. And now you can see that very small microclimate, which is promoting grasses there. Another manure. So that's actually what's given us a huge advantage as ranchers. This is a picture taken at the ranch. So I really did not realize these hardworking folks, which are the dung beetles. I did not realize how important they were to the ranch. Just take a look at this picture. is a side picture of the work that the dung beetles do with a cow pie. They put 2/3 of the cow pie into the soil. That's why when you see those pictures, you see a huge difference in the color of the grasses, the shape of the grasses, and so on. So one of our first recommendations that we give to our clients and friends is to stop using dewormers, because these chemical companies can tell us whatever they want, but we know that it's not good for life. So we're trying to promote life in all its forms. Actually, we found this guy last year at the ranch. I saw this rhino beetle is much bigger than the one you just saw, the gazella, and was striving for diversity not only on grasses but also insects, wildlife, and so on. So I saw this dung beetle the first time at the ranch of a friend of mine, Jesus Almeida. And you know, you're wondering when I'm going to have this dung beetle. And they all come. I mean, you just need to build a house for them. Somewhere they come and they find their house, and that's 24/7 worker that we have. We actually use the cow pies as an indicator of how we're doing with our grazing. For example, in the upper left, we have a cow pie that is very loose. And that could tell us a few things. Actually, the one at the bottom is how we want to look the cow pies. It will vary through the year, but during the green season, we should see the cow pies look more like a cake, the one at the bottom. The upper left is telling me, and that's a very common issue at the ranches we have seen, is that people just see a little bit of grass, even though the grass is not ready, it's too early, and they turn in the cows. And that's what happened. If you start seeing a lot of loose manure, that means that there's most likely an excess of protein, and you're pretty much overgrazing those grasses. So for us, one of the most important tasks is to fix the water cycle. We did an infiltration test at the ranch, and on this bare ground on the upper left, we were able to infiltrate, based on the NRCS tables, 2 inches of rain per hour. On the lower part, on the lower picture, we've been grazing this more intensively, and based on NRCS, we are able to infiltrate 18 inches per hour. So a lot of people just complains about us ranchers saying, oh, well, you know, your cows are drinking too much water, so there's an issue. But we have to see the whole picture. So just the difference between these two spots, if we just crunch some numbers, just the difference, multiply or extrapolate to the 30,000 acres, that would be sufficient water to provide the needs of a 100,000 people town for a full year. Just think about that. How much benefit and responsibility we have as ranchers in our own properties about the water cycle. That's a lot. Something we've been seeing lately is that elusive 40%. Most of the ranchers now are getting a little bit more rain than before. I mean, putting besides the effective rainfall. As you may know, 100% of the rain, 60% comes from the sea about, and 40% is actually rainfall that we should be promoting or creating in our ecosystems. But as we've been degrading our land through bad practices or conventional practices in farming and ranching, we've been losing that 40%. Now, can we actually make a difference on that 40%? I think so. This is a map of the ranch where the ranch is exactly located, and we are starting to see some difference in rainfall. A closer look. I'm not saying that we're getting a lot of rain at the ranch, but we start seeing some difference already. So is it really something that happened in the last 3 years? We don't know, but I think we do believe that we can make a big difference in the whole ecosystems by actually having skin and green plants in the soil, and that would help with the whole water cycle. Now, sometimes we get too caught into, doing this very nice grazing. But some of the properties we have seen, we see that they graze 2 or 3 times the same paddock per year. And remember that we are in a seasonal rainfall in a brittle environment, which a lot of places, including most of the western state US, northern Mexico, and many other places, we have seasonal rainfall. So the best results we have had is with long rest periods, 9, 10, 12 months, and it depends on the rains. But that will allow us to actually grow more diverse set of perennial grasses. I like this picture because this picture was taken this year at the ranch. And what I'm trying to show you there is 2 different grass species, perennial grass species. The one marked with the red is the sprangle top, which we just saw it. We call it zacate gigante. And then the one marked with yellow, which are already put as seed head, is the tobosa grass. Now, which ones are we trying to protect? I mean, the cows can tell that. We want diversity, but the cows can tell us which one is more palatable. In this case, cow go first for the sprangle top. So if our understanding is that in order for the grass, to protect the grass, you shouldn't really graze that grass before it puts a seed head, then that paddock is not ready to be grazed yet. I mean, it's just by seeing that some of the grasses just put a seed head and it's ready to be grazed. In this case, it's not, because our rest periods are determined by the sprangle top. Once the sprangle top is actually fully developed and the root system is fully developed, then I'm gonna graze that paddock. So that's how we determine. We don't really determine by fixed times the rest periods. We don't really determine it by the height of the grass. In these brittle environments, we actually we're very flexible, and depending on the rains and depending on what you observe, because if we have very late rains, what's going to happen is that the grass is going to put a seed head of very short, the same species. If we have plenty of rain, it's going to keep growing and growing and growing to its full potential, and then it's going to put a seed head. So yeah, that's how it takes a lot of observation in your paddocks to see how you're doing and if you're actually getting more diversity. Nature actually gives you a feedback on how are you doing. Okay, let's keep going. I just checked my clock and I just talked too much. So this is another example of a good rested area. Most of the conventional ranches, they have these water spats all trashed, and conservationists always complain about us ranchers saying, oh no, you shouldn't really get into these riparian areas and so on. But in reality, if we do a very short duration, high intensity, long rest periods, these are going to be our best areas, and it will promote a lot of life into those water spots. Some people say, well, no, it's not going to work here in my place because I have sand, because I don't have rain, because so on and so on and so on. And that's why I wanted to give you this example. This is a mine in Chihuahua, Mexico, a gold mine. And the owners work with one of our friends. One of our friends advised them how to actually revert this gravel into grass. So the grass, my friend, whose last name is Guerrero, this is how if you can actually see the cattle on a very high density there. There we go, here. And then the spots that they already work. So they were able to actually green up the whole thing, which was originally gravel. So as my friend said, I mean, if we were able to change this or green up this, then, well, what's our excuse? This is a close up. See, they do bale grazing on the left part early spring. The right part is after the rains. So it's really, really amazing how they green up these spots. You'll see the original gravel, and then how the grass is coming up, and then a piece of, just to compare. Actually, these guys, the owners and their partners in Canada, they got an award, a very reputable award for the work that they have done. The other part of the equation, which we many times missed, we're trying to make this work with the same cattle that we have. And I'm not saying that you have really bad genetics. It's just that you need to get into this ongoing selection and culling process. So what we do is we select the bulls from the top cows that are really trouble-free, shiny coat, good body condition, fertile cows. And then we also cull the cows from the same reasons, the 20% based on body condition, hair coat, and fertility. And that percentage is actually determined by the rancher. If we know that we are actually going through a very tough drought or something like that, we increase the culling rate, but there's always has to be some order in the culling. So whatever is left is better than what was sold. So we do an ongoing selection and culling year round. The idea is for you to actually act as a predator and trying to keep your herd clean. What's the issue if you don't do that and you try to get all the cows to work under this adaptive grazing? Well, the poor performance are going to drive the whole show, and we don't want that. Some pictures to compare. For example, here, low and high maintenance cows under the same conditions. You can see the big difference there. This is a picture from a good friend of mine, Gerardo Diaz. Another comparison of two bulls. So we're trying to get into these more moderate, easy fleshing, low maintenance bulls. See, the bull on the left is what we are striving for. The one on the right, you can actually see that it's going to be a more high maintenance bull. Same deal. We prefer to have the bull on the left. Obviously, all the bulls, since they were young, they should look like a bulls, behave like a bulls, and be of a good dam that keeps a good body condition. These are pictures from a ranch in Chihuahua. in Coahuila, a state next to Chihuahua. And this is a herd that has been selected for more than 60 years, a close herd. And we've been using these genetics, not only me, but many ranchers, to put those easy fleshing, easily put fat on all our breeds. This is a cow from the same ranch. It's not King Ranch, it has the same brand, but yeah, this Billy Fine and the original founder, he was so ahead of the game. This is another ranch from another friend in Chihuahua. He's been teaching us a lot about selection and culling. And these are herds that they try to get them adapted to their environment, not the other way. We shouldn't really try to modify the environments to get it adapted to the cows. It's the other way around. This is a cow and one of his herds from his ranch. This is a Corriente cow. So if you see, we're actually not leaning towards specific breed. There will always be good individuals and bad individuals within any herd in any ranch. What we're trying to encourage the ranchers is to do this ongoing selection and culling of the top and the bottom of that bell curve. For example, this is a cow of the same friend of mine who has this black Angus, and you see he's actually forcing that cow to get the grass from that cholla cactus. This is one of his cows. See how they learn this behavior of getting that flower from the yucca. The time you will start providing some feed to those cows, we will discourage them to try to find their own supplementation, their own minerals, their own protein or energy. Back to Las Damas Ranch. This is a cow and a heifer. We do late weaning, and they have figured out how to take advantage of the prickly pear cactus. Is a source of protein when everything is just pretty dry. And don't be too much concerned because they have a way to get rid of those thorns or spines. They scratch it against the surface and then they eat it. So we have to take advantage of whatever is in our ranches instead of fighting for the cactus or fighting there's a lot of feed out there. We just need to get the proper culling of these poor individuals who are not taking advantage of that feed. This is how that some of those cactus look like after they were worked by the cows. And after winter in spring, then the cactus were not killed actually. I'm getting even more cactus now, but it's okay for me because it's also more feed for the cows. Just to sum up what we're just talking about. So conventional is 6 more pounds per individual animal, more productivity. We are looking more into the profitability, more pounds per acre at a lower cost. There's in conventional too much emphasis on killing, and our emphasis is on promoting more life, more quantity and quality of perennial grasses. Conventional is lack of understanding and education on how to work in sync with nature. And regenerative is more, we have to be very into this continuous education. Conventional is pamper animals requiring higher inputs. We do try to do an ongoing selection and culling of animals based on adaptability and performance. Conventional is cowing during the dry, cold season. We try to cow during the green season. Obviously, as you go with regenerative ranching, your green season is going to extend. So our goal should be to have green grasses year-round. Conventional is very short rest periods, and we strive to have these long rest periods as that has given us the best results in these brittle environments. Conventional is very light rotational grazing, even set stocking, continuous grazing. We do more intensive grazing, daily or twice a day moves. Conventionally, there's very few pastures, probably less than 20. We do have at the ranch more than 300 permanent pastures, but if we split it, then we ended up like a 500 or more paddocks. And then we actually see very common conventional operations, multiple herds spread across the ranch. We try to have as few herds as possible at the ranch because it will save us labor and it will actually make us more robust operation and much easier to control and to see it. Let's take a look at some details of how we fence and things like that. Most of the ranchers that are being regenerated here in Chihuahua and across Mexico, we use the fishbone fencing design, meaning a main water line and these lawn strips with a permanent electric fence. And in my particular case, the length of these lawn strips, paddocks, are about 3,000 feet, and they are 600 feet wide. Why 600 feet wide? Because that's the equivalent of a small polybar roll. So if you grow enough grass on those particular lawn strips, then on the next grazing, you can cross fence that particular paddock. One of the very important areas that we learn from Arnold Clocker, a very good grazer from Chile who developed his career in Argentina, is to prioritize your investments. Meaning you have to get first implemented your plans on the low-hanging fruit, then go from there to the most costly degraded areas. Usually we work exactly opposite. We don't want to see anything bad in our ranches degraded, and we put our investment there. It should really be the other way around. We need to protect what's still out there, whatever the grass is still there. We need to protect it, increase it, improve it, then you move on to other areas. That way you will have results in the short term instead of just having your investment hanging in there and very marginal results. Going back to the ranch, this is how my ranch looked like based on a ranking system or based on priorities. For example, here the green areas are the easier to fence, the easier to develop the water, and the ones that have the most of the grass. So obviously on those green spots, which in my case is more like the flat bottoms, is where I'm going to start working on it. So I'm going to develop. See the master water plan has to be planned from the very beginning, but the implementation has to follow an order. And in my particular case, in my ranch, the follow is going to be like working first on the green spots, then on the pink ones, which are for me the second ones, easy to implement on a return on investment or cost benefit, then the yellow ones, and I'm gonna leave for the very end the red ones. So you have to get into a discipline of just having to have this neutrality, saying, okay, I'm gonna work hard on the green parts, but I know that some of the red or yellow is gonna be degrading. But I think that makes a lot of sense to us, to actually, for the rancher to get results in the short term, because at the end of the day, just by fixing the green parts in a few years, you're gonna be able to carry the cattle just on those high productive spots as even more cattle than the whole ranch. This is how the ranch looked like. Now, there I just want to share with you that it's very important when you are going to start planning to forget about existing fences, existing water pipe, existing roads. Because if you try to fit these designs, these new designs into whatever is out there, you're going to be constrained. So it's better for you to do the whole planning like in a blank sheet of paper, and then you decide whether you turn down the existing fences or change the roads or replace existing water pipeline. But it's better to start from a blank page. This is what we use as a corner post. Everything is insulated. This is used in combination with this post, a Pasture Pro post, just one single high tensile wire. Another approach we have is this corner post, which is actually made in Mexico. And that's in combination with this T-post with an insulator. Both work okay. I mean, I don't really have any specific preference. This is a water pipeline at the ranch. Water is the most important, the most expensive things we have to do in these plural environments. You're gonna have as many cattle as your flow rate. So if you think that you need a 2-inch pipe, you better go to 3-inch. If you think you need a 1.5, you better go to 2-inch, because that's something that is going to tie back to your faith, to your belief. So the first thing and very important thing is for you to have faith on this kind of management. We have 50 permanent troughs. This is the design of the troughs. And they are shared on multiple paddocks, let's say 8 to 10 paddocks. We also use these kind of troughs when we have some issue with the water flow rate in certain spots. But you also can use portable troughs. When you do use portable troughs, then you can go and have one trough for each 4 paddocks or for each 2 paddocks, which make it much more efficient for the cows. Each approach has its own benefits and drawbacks. This is another trough that was homemade in Chihuahua, built to last. Another one, a different example in another ranch in Chihuahua, just to give you an idea of how the portable troughs are. This is built in the US, a different one with storage. And this is the kind of storage tanks that we also use at the ranch. Your water system has to be pretty robust and reliable. So you always have to have a plan B, because your cows can go with very poor grazing for a few days, but with no water, I mean, they won't last but a few hours. I mean, there is a chaos when you're running with very little water, or you cannot water your cows. Remember that we have a spot at the ranch where we have the Sierra, the mountain range. Okay, so that's how we manage. We actually do not fence too much the Sierra. We do more herding and also polywire. These are the cows grazing in some of these slopes of the Sierra, the mountain range, the ranch. You can see the polywire there. It hardly see, but on the left side we already grazed. The right side we're going to graze it. This is in winter. So people are pretty creative. One of the most important things is to get results. And then you don't really have to motivate your people. They just, oh, my people just, I didn't ask them to do this. You can even see a rock in the middle, just pulling the wire down. So they use whatever is there. I mean, they get very creative to make things work because they do believe in it. See how they work. This era is just pretty amazing. It's just like pulling a bulldozer there. See how they graze this and work this, all this era. It's just amazing the response that we have got there. Let's keep going. So lessons learned after 14 years on holistic management. For us, water is the most important nutrient. So as we said, I have never heard any rancher complain about, oh, I built a very big storage tank, or I put up such a big water pipe, but I have heard a lot of ranchers complaining about not having enough storage or enough flow rate. Another point that we already mentioned is put your money where you get more for your bank. Just to summarize, is longer your rest periods to favor the diversity of perennial native grasses, and have a strict selection criteria. We need to have the right cattle to help us improve these lands, and stop fighting nature and hang out with like-minded people. We speak a different language. I mean, why? I mean, one of the huge advantage we have locally here is that we're not alone anymore. There are a few hundred people that we can share informally, formally, and so on. Believe and you will. These guys do not have roads, don't have anything, but they're gonna make it work. Thank you.
So Alejandro, thank you very, very much. We deeply appreciate that presentation, and we will get to questions here in just a moment. However, I do want to remind everybody this evening that we do have another upcoming webinar. It will be October the 6th with a start time of 7 p.m. Central Time. This will be an outstanding webinar looking at the global influence of insects in conservation, biodiversity, and regenerative agriculture. And the title of the webinar is Six-Legged Stewards. And our presenter that evening will be Ralph Washington Jr. So we do invite everyone to sign up for that webinar. It will be incredibly interesting and informative. We also have 2 additional schools coming up. We have our September 22nd to 24th school in Caldwell, Idaho at McIntyre Farms. They are our host farm. And the title of that school is Regenerate Your Pocketbook with Stacked Enterprises. We have another school coming up at Seven Sons Farm in Roanoke, Indiana on November the 3rd through the 5th, titled Keys to Marketing Success, How to Become a Price Maker and Not a Price Taker. So Alejandro and panelists, we are going to dive into the questions now. So Alejandro, for each question, I will start with you and then open it up to any of our panelists for their comments and input as well. So
okay.
The first question, Alejandro, is from Willie Pretorius, and it has to do with the picture that you showed of the severe erosion where the fence was suspended, and you showed the carbon layer and all of that. And Willie's question is that degraded land that you showed in the picture with the large organic A horizon?
Yeah, it is. It is. It started as a very small degradation, and the same way that we regenerate the land and it start coming up with some critical mass and improvements slowly, and then it gets faster. It's exactly the same way when we're going down. I mean, it just speeded up, and I have seen in the last 14 years a lot of degradation that it only took 5 years, but it used to take 20 years. But management hasn't changed yet, hasn't changed on those ranches. Did I answer that question? I'm not sure if that's what was expected from the question.
Well, yeah, thank you, Alejandro. And I will add to that, Willie, I have personally been to that very spot as well with Alejandro and several others and viewed that. And what it is a picture of is what used to grow there. And Alejandro basically stated that when he was showing that slide, that when you see that 4 to 5 foot deep carbon layer, and then you see carbon trails going more than 20 foot deep, that meant that at one time there was that much grass, trees, and other things that were growing there in the desert to be able to create that amount of carbon in the soil. So it was a clear picture of what once was. We call that historical ecological perspective, and what can be again. And that's exactly what Alejandro and his fellow ranchers are doing right now. They are recreating what has happened there. Alejandro, the second question is, how do you track biodiversity? Do you do it via satellite or just through observations?
Yeah, we do a lot of observation, and we don't really track it through satellite. What we're doing is, see, the way it works is we spend some time with the cows, and on the next, I mean, in order for us to calculate how long the cows are gonna stay in the next paddock, we use a lot of the horses for work because it's a big ranch. Even though the paddocks may be small, but we go on horse and take a look at the next paddock, and we try to calculate the time that they're going to spend on that particular paddock. Because remember that in the desert, everything is just very patchy. There will be paddocks that are going to have a lot of grass, and some others just a little bit of grass. And we have to adjust the times to whatever we observe. Once the cattle, so that really gives us the opportunity to also observe what's going on, or how the next paddock, which is actually very prime, well-rested paddock, to look at the species present, to look at the grasses, and to look at even the insects and the life and so on. So for us, that's the observation that's the opportunity we have to observe what's going on, and whether we're going forward or backward based on or whatever we do last time. And that's also adjusted based on the rainfall. We may end up skipping some paddocks because it did not rain. So you have to really remain very flexible in your management. And the cows are gonna actually tell you whether they're happy or not, whether they are full or not, full or they are not full. And you have a lot of communication between you and your cows and your land and so on.
Thanks, Alejandro. The third question this evening is from Teresa, and it is, how do you tell how much protein is in your grass or when it is ready to be grazed so that cows do not have loose manure or stools?
Yeah, the way we manage that is we remember that we are leaning towards a long rest periods. Now, obviously, there are some issues when you start, because if we say that if we do some selection, then most of the selection taking place is on a very high protein diet. Now we're going to ask the cows to get a more balanced diet between the dry and the green matter. So we have to start not from scratch, but we have to start selecting for the cows that are thriving on that. And the way we know is, well, we always trying to keep the cows full. I mean, full and their well-being to be actually happy cows. And so when you actually go and take a look at the cows in the morning or even in the afternoon, if you're doing a twice a day move, the ideal situation is for them to be laying down and ruminating. That's the ideal. What I want to share you with just a parenthesis is we don't just go and open the gate. We try to spend sometimes, we do twice a day moves. So we try to spend sometimes on horse in the morning before we move them. The afternoon is the same, but we actually go on foot. So we can manage, we can move the cattle on either way. So in terms of the manure, if it is the green season, the manure has to look in the majority, because remember that each cow is individual on their needs and diets, but is an indicator, and the majority of the cow pie should look like a pie. If there's a lot of runny manure, it's most of the time, it means that we're turning the cows into a very immature season. And remember, the optimal nutritional point of a grass is actually before it put a seed head. And that's what we look for. We try not to graze before they actually put a seed head.
Thanks, Alejandro. And yes, I'll add that, we try to avoid both very highly vegetative forage that will cause a lot of loose stools, and high percent legume pastures will also cause a lot of loose stools. And just as Alejandro said, we like to graze when grasses are at or near mid-stage maturity, which means they're in the boot stage and starting to put on seed heads. So totally agree. Do any of our other panelists want to add anything here? Okay, we'll move to the next question from Nisha and Alejandro. This question is, do any of the ranchers in the Pasticultores network raise alpacas or sheep?
Yeah, I personally raise sheep, and actually there are some people raising sheep as well. And that actually is a very good question, because we're always striving to get a diversity of grasses, of wildlife, and so on. But what about the grazers itself? Are we trying to fix everything with the cows? I mean, if we're trying to mimic nature, we want also diversity on the species that we have grazing. So for us, it would be ideal to graze two or three species at least: cows, sheep, even donkeys. I mean, they all have their own way of grazing. They graze different, and we will actually do a much better work with multiple species with just one species, meaning like cows, just only cows.
Thank you. The next question is from Allison, and Allison asks, could you please explain what makes some cattle high maintenance versus low maintenance?
Yeah, there are some cows that were designed to be like high milking cows, which required a lot of energy. And there are some cows that we've been designing being promoted for the feedlot. And I mean, the thing here is that we have to split it into two parts. One is the rancher. The ranch has to be profitable in order to survive. And whoever is next on the chain, either the grass-fed or the feedlot, we want to actually raise cattle that will work on that spot. But if we don't save the ranch, what's the point of getting this great marbling and so on? So actually, in the last years, we have a trend towards a more bigger, high maintenance, and with a lot of inputs cows. And we have to go back and take a look and start selecting and culling For the cows, there always be a group of cows in any ranch. There are the ones that do not give us any trouble, that they cow by itself and so on. Those are the kind of genetics that we need to promote and keep cooling at the bottom. Keep cooling, be strict at the bottom, and we will end up with a very low maintenance cow herd. I don't know if you want to add something, Alan, to that regard.
Well, typically what you mentioned, one of the things are cattle that are too high milking. You know, if when we're talking about beef cows, we're not trying to raise dairy cows, we're trying to raise beef cows, and we're expecting them to make it predominantly on forage, whether it's on the range or in a pasture. And those cattle need to be low to no more than moderate milk. But secondly, we have a lot of cattle, particularly in the beef breed, that are too large frame and require too much maintenance. What we have to realize is that every animal needs to consume somewhere in the neighborhood of 3% of their body weight of forage dry matter every day to perform. And if we're looking at a 1,000-pound cow, that 1,000-pound cow, to do that, is going to need to consume about 30 pounds of dry matter per head per day to be able to do that. But if we're talking about a 1,500-pound cow, she now has to consume 45 pounds of dry matter per head per day to have that same 3% intake. That's a 15-pound difference. If you multiply that by 365 days, that's a rather profound difference. You can run a lot more low maintenance cows on the exact same acres than you can the high maintenance cows. So phenotype is critically important in this regard, and Alejandro did a great job of showing some contrasting phenotypes in his presentation. The next question is from Nancy, and Nancy asked, with the open water tanks, doesn't the water evaporate quickly? Do people ever cover them to prevent evaporation?
Yes, the answer is yes, it does evaporate. There's a lot of water loss on evaporation, and it's always much, much better to have those tanks covered. And that's what we have experienced at a lot of, in this particular summer, it was very, very hot, and we were losing big time of water through evaporation.
Thank you. The next question is from Shannon, and Shannon asks, Alejandro, when setting up your paddocks, do you take into account having shade for the cattle? Also, when bale grazing on the gold mine land, do you select hay that has a lot of seed in it to reseed the area?
Okay, on the first question is, see, some of the issues we have with cattle not dealing with without shade is it relates to the diet and to the genetics. They may be eating too much green or immature grass, and that excess of protein may be actually hitting their body, so they are looking for shade. Yes, also keep in mind that we don't really fight the mesquite, and they are actually helping us with shade at the ranch. And the other is selection. I mean, if you see cattle struggling by not having shade, then just try to cool that first 10 or 5% bottom that are struggling with, because we always have to look at the cows that are doing well and wondering, why are they doing well? I mean, then if they're doing well, why the other ones are not doing that well? And that actually takes cooling. And regarding the hay, actually the hay was used to build to put carbon in the soil, but they did apply some native seeds on those specific spots at the mine. So there's additional seed that was applied on that particular spot, because you cannot expect to have any seed on that gravel. So In our particular case, we did not use any seeds because we know that the seed was under the ground. Even if you see a bare ground, there's a hard pan that's protecting that seed. It's just a matter of you creating the environment to promote the germination of that seed.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you start or begin with a very degraded ranch with very little grass?
Yeah, what we usually do there is we have to walk. We have to know our ranches. Most of the time, the grass is where there's no water, and most ranchers have a limitation on their water system. So the places that are still intact or still have some perennial grasses are the one farther from the water. And we have to actually look for places that still have some grass, and then you're going to build your paddocks in such a size where you still have grass, where they are going to make an impact. It really doesn't make any difference if we go for an approach of splitting the ranch in 2 and then in 4 and then in 8 and 16 and so on, because the results are going to be marginal and the investment is going to be there. It's better to actually focus your investment on whatever is still left, and the remaining of the ranch, you're going to manage it the way you're managing right now. But once you graze in a more intensive way those areas that still have some grass on it, then you have to protect those areas in such a way that you will give a full rest until the grasses are fully recovered and not a single animal in those areas. Then once you start seeing a difference within a year, given an average rainfall in those areas, then you have to keep expanding from your second high priority areas and so on. So you're gonna grow from the best areas to the worst areas until you pretty much cover most of your ranch.
Thank you. Question from Jeffrey: what was being fed to the cattle to sustain them until forage was available?
I mean, probably he means on the mine or on other ranch.
Well, let's answer it for both. Let's talk about what was being fed to the cattle on the mine ground and what was being fed to the cattle on the Las Damas.
Yeah, on the mine, as you see, is bale grazing. So the cows, I'm not really sure because he was a friend of mine, Enrique Guerrero, who actually assisted the mine. But my understanding it was just bale grazing with some supplement there. So we try to keep those cows in a good shape while at the same time fixing the soil. Obviously, the objective was to use the cows as a tool, but it was obvious that the cows were in good shape doing their work there. At the ranch, we actually get away from feeding the cows. So we have to feed the cows on the first years, because keep in mind that when you start moving from a completely degraded place into this regenerative way, you're going to be exposed to droughts and so on, because your soil is pretty, it doesn't really infiltrate much. So you move gradually from using a lot of inputs until you actually are no using inputs. But it's a gradual, and it depends really on how intensive or how degraded your ranch is.
Thank you. Any feedback from any other panelists on that? Okay, the next question, Alejandro, is from Susan, and Susan asks, are you familiar with the techniques that Masanobu Fukuoka used for greening the desert? And is anyone using them?
Yeah, I may pass that on to one of the panelists.
This is Ray. Alejandro and I talked about it, that Masanobu used some of the examples on Seed in the Desert, he used clay balls and put seed in it. And that was one mechanism that he used. I'm not sure how effective it was, but and I will just make a comment on this, and what makes Alejandro's system so effective is that as you observe those pictures, because I was there with Ellen and I was very fortunate to be with Alejandro, and Gabe's been there and Shane, is that if you notice those desert soils, and I grew up in New Mexico, is that there's this very heavy crust on that soil surface. And just using clay balls like Masanuba was thinking, and we all know, all the panelists and all the majority of the participants realize that plants are probably the most powerful tool to restore the soil. But what makes animals an incredible catalyst to that, and again, nature doesn't farm without animals, is that hoof action, that manure and urine, first that hoof action breaks that crust. And then that manure, and you saw Alejandro's picture on that manure pie, how that started to inoculate that system with life, protozoa, organisms, and start that ecosystem processes. So the cattle are those mobile links, those resource links that start that process. When I read Masanuba's literature, his book, great idea, but I think it would work also in conjunction better with animals in that system. And that's why Alejandro's system is so incredible, because it starts those ecosystem processes and re-stimulates that ecological memory, that seed bank.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that very much. And Alejandro, talk just a little bit about when you bale graze, whether we're talking about bale grazing on the mined land that is being reclaimed, or bale grazing in any degraded areas. Talk about how you look, and you and I have done this together, like at the High Lonesome Ranch, different places. But talk about how even with bale grazing, we're purposefully looking for areas that are already exhibiting some evidence of biology and productivity and starting there first, and why we do that.
Yes, Alan. It's the same principle of going for the low-hanging fruit, or trying to get the faster return on investment. So most of the bale grazing is done on bare ground because, it's our nature trying to fix what's broken. But for us, it makes much more sense to try to find those patches of grasses and then put our bales there. What we see there is, oh yeah, we already have grass. What's the point of investing more on that? But you saw in the pictures that the quality is greatly improved on the grasses. The quality is greatly improved on the grasses. So it's always better to first, even in bale grazing or putting your pipe or your fences and so on, to invest in whatever still has some standing grasses, perennial grasses, or even annuals, compared to bare ground.
Thank you. The next question is from Lynn, and Lynn asks, how high of a stock density do you need to get appropriate response from the grasses?
Yeah, in our particular case, right now we are, and you saw it's a brittle environment, we're at 40,000 pounds per acre. That's giving us good results on rangeland in brittle environments. But see, sometimes it's quite relative, because if you get into a paddock where there's only just patches of grasses, you'll see that if you see the math, you see, yeah, it's a 40,000 pounds per acre on XYZ size and X number of cows. But in reality, the density is much higher because they all concentrate on the patches. And once they're done with these patches of grasses, you have to move on and move it. So yeah, mathematically it's 40,000, but practically maybe much higher than that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Alejandro. Having seen, what your cattle are doing in many of those pastures, that's exactly correct. You've got areas where they're easily exceeding 200,000 pounds per acre, concentrating on those patches. And I would also say that when you get into areas that are much more temperate and not nearly as brittle as your environment, that oftentimes it takes higher stock densities. We're talking about anywhere from 100,000, 200,000 pounds per acre or more to get the type of response that we're seeking. Anybody else want to have input on that? Okay, the next question is from Clint, and Clint asks, how do you vary your rotation based on your rainfall?
Okay. Well, and we all know that unfortunately the rainfall patterns are changing and not really for good. And that actually goes back to all the bare ground and the exponential temperatures that we have, and it creates a huge issue across large areas in the Southwest, Western, Northern Mexico, Western US, and so on. So we ended up with being very adaptive to the rainfall, meaning that, for example, if we have an area that hasn't really rained much, it really doesn't make any sense to us to sacrifice our cows and sacrifice the area. So we just skip the area. Then if it rained a little bit less than that, if it rained less than what it was expected, then we adjust the times. The cows are gonna the cows is really guiding us how long they can stay in an area. Because for example, instead of you having X amount of grass on a normal rainfall, you probably have half. Then you'll see that last year with good rainfalls, it took you a day to graze that area. Now you go back and in half a day, and then actually they're done and you have to move them. You're always adjusting based on the available forage, and that available forage is going to change in every year, every month, and so on. So it really takes a lot of observation to just, obviously, as you advance on these grazing management, on the plant grazing management, things are going to be easier. And I think that's the good thing about it. More ground cover, more grasses, better infiltration, and so on. So the job is going to be easier for us. But anyway, we always are open to change the timing and to change the direction of the grazing.
Thanks, Alejandro. The next question is from Lawrence. And Lawrence asks, have you had to reduce your numbers this year because of the drought?
Yes, definitely yes. Not now yet. And that's kind of the beauty of this management, because we are taking advantage of every drop of rain. Obviously, we have to have a minimum amount of rainfall, but remember that bottom 20%, bottom yearly 20% that we always looking to, like every 2 weeks, we're cooling. So we've been cooling these last 6 months every twice a month, getting rid of the cows, and it all goes back to timing. On cows, doing the things on time is just make a big difference instead of just, and that's the beauty of looking your cows very often, because I don't care about the cows are doing well. I do care about the cows are not doing well. And this year has been very tough. So instead of, let's say, calling 20%, I have to increase it to 20%, 40%, whatever it takes. You are being very preemptive. So with your increasing your calling, you are actually trying to adjust the stocking rate to whatever available forage you're seeing. So yeah, you have to be very flexible on that. And that doesn't mean that you will never cull. It depends on the year. But on the last 10 years, we've been increasing the herd. This year is very challenging. And the expectation is to cull at a higher percentage.
Thank you. The next question is from Larry, and he asks, where do you source your water from wells or runoff?
Yeah, we try to build a system that is, I mean, if you don't really have a reliable water source year round, you will be driving by whatever the water is. And that doesn't mean that is the best paddock. So what it really takes you across a big dry spell or drought is to have a robust, reliable water system. So yes, we do have these dirt ponds where if it rains, it is going to help us save some water, but our system is built and designed on water wells. And if we really don't have any of those ponds with water, the management is still going. And we're going to graze wherever we need to be, regardless of whether it rained or it did not rain. So you have to really build a very robust and available system across the ranch.
The next question is from Lynn, and Lynn asks, are there cattle care issues that appear with high stock densities? For instance, bull hierarchy issues with many bulls in a small area, and orphaned calves with cows birthing in higher stock densities.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, remember, it's all about cooling. I mean, all bulls have to be working. And if we see a bull that is just kind of there, not working, just apart, and we just cool the bull. I mean, our bulls always, I mean, there's like a seasonal thing, but when you see them working, you gotta see them all working. And then obviously we are running much fewer bulls than when we have these herds across the whole ranch, multiple herds. So we need much fewer bulls. We're right now running like one bull for every 30 or 40 cows. And that's good enough for us to get good pregnancy rates. About the cows, yeah, we had the issue at the beginning, and it took us a few years to realize what was the issue. And we had that issue. Obviously, it's also genetic selection, but I think our main issue was nutritional. You can have all the grass in the world, I mean, but if you're not moving on time, they're always going to be hungry. So the issue we were having is we were not really timing the moves right. So the cows were hungry and their mindset was, I need to eat and then I care for my calf. And we were having that issue. Now that we're better at timing the moves, then that issue is pretty much non-existent. I mean, there are just few calves that we found them with no dam, but I think we were able to fix that issue, or we can fix that issue with proper moves, nutrition, and proper selection and cooling.
I would totally agree. We also use multi-sire breeding, so the bulls are in with the cows on the daily moves, rarely have any kind of issues there. The bulls, though, are maintained together when they're not breeding. So when they're removed from the cows, the bulls are together and they're moved routinely as well. So they never get out of that habit of being moved daily and being together. So if you manage the bulls appropriately, you're rarely going to have any problems. And with the orphan calves or cows leaving calves behind, that's predominantly two issues. One is a maternal issue with the cows. A cow needs to know that she is being moved daily, and therefore she needs to go get her calf, be responsible for her calf. We expect them to do that. But secondly, don't try when you're in the middle of calving to have ultra high stock density. You know, at that point in time, you can relax densities a little bit at anywhere from 20, 30, 40,000 pounds per acre up to even 100,000 pounds per acre. We've rarely seen any issues with cows leaving calves behind. It's only when you get significantly above that that you start to see those kinds of issues show themselves. The other thing, though, is just the management on those daily moves. Don't go, as Alejandro said, keep the cows full and content. And when you make those daily moves, you know, make sure that the cows and the calves have all paired up, that they're together before you remove the poly wire for them to move into the next paddock. So part of that is our management strategy as well, and how we manage these calving cows on those daily moves. We can make a mistake that can create issues there also. So anybody else, Shane or Doug, anybody else want to offer anything there?
Hey, Alan, this is Doug Peterson. I would just offer that using a Bud Williams driving technique instead of a calling technique, we have found that that's much more effective on a cow-calf herd, particularly with young calves. As you said, go around them, make them find their calf, and begin to push them toward the direction you want, and they will naturally herd up instead of calling them. The calling technique, the cows will take off running a lot of times and they will leave their calf behind. But if you begin to drive them first, then generally they will hook up with their calf first.
Thank you, Doug. Very much appreciate that. Okay, the next question is from Lynn Stiller, and Lynn asked, Alejandro, you showed the picture of the green, pink, yellow, and red areas of your ranch. So after 14 years, are you working now on the yellow and red areas? And if so, how well is that working?
Sorry, can you repeat the last words? Does he ask about the red or yellow?
Yeah, the green, pink, yellow, and red, the way that you divided up your ranch in terms of the areas of the ranch. And they want to know, are you now working on those yellow and red areas on your ranch?
No, not the red ones. The yellow, yes. And that's our first. See, everything, we have to be always open to read and listen to nature. So my first approach was, okay, I think this is the area that is most productive. And then the second one and third one. But then you give some trials on the areas that are not actually the green ones. You want to give a trial on the pink or yellow, even at the beginning or in the second year. Because, for example, in our case, we say, okay, the flats are the better ones. They have this runoff from the sierra and the hills, and they're going to be very productive. And very recently, we put some water on the sierra, and the result, the return was just amazing. So if I had known that from the very beginning, I would have invested, put the same investment on the flats and the sierra, but it's something that you have to discover, and you have to let nature be your guide. No, the red ones, no, because we have to pump the water up there. There's very little grass, and the cows are going to struggle. See, that's one of the issues. We try to do everything with the cows, but there's some terrain that is better fit for a different animal, being that sheep or goats or donkeys or whatever.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. There are areas, and probably on most people's farms or ranches, that another species may be most appropriate at a certain period in time. So So you do need to be thinking about other species, sheep, goats, pigs, as Alejandro said, even donkeys, other species that can utilize some of these rougher areas so that you can begin to make some progress and then later on be able to bring the cows into there. The next question is, do you utilize a computer program or an app to assist with pasture management decision making?
No, I have not done so. No.
So I will just throw in here that there are options there. We do have a lot of clients that are using apps such as the Pasture Map app or the Maya Grazing app, and many have found those to be very useful in what they're doing. They use both of those apps, are downloadable to a smartphone, a tablet, iPad, anything like that, a laptop, and they utilize Google Earth technology, so you can see your land as it appears and be able to work with it. They have data tracking. You can it archives data. You can even upload pictures and things like that. So there are apps that are available that can be useful. The next question is, what is your biggest challenge from a business and marketing point of view?
Yeah, let's go with the marketing. Obviously, when you are actually working on the soil, on your genetics and so on, the natural way of marketing your beef would be on the grass-fed market. In our particular case in Mexico, there's really not yet that market. And also some of us just like the production side. So that would be a challenge right now where we are for people to be more aware of the benefits of the grass-fed beef. On the business side is actually going from the red to the black. I mean, going from a non-profitable to actually a profitable ranch. And unfortunately, you make a lot of mistakes. At the beginning, one of the benefits, obviously, that we had, that I particularly have, was that I have good mentors locally here. So we should always try to get that mentor where you have the questions or doubts and you just can grab the phone and call that particular person. And I have that great benefit. It's gonna save you a lot of time, a lot of money, because we have made just too many mistakes that we're just trying to share with you and to help you with that. And it's going to take you much less time to do what we have done in more years.
The next question is from Jerry, and Jerry asks, can you explain how you integrate your sheep with the cattle, or do you run them totally separate from the cattle?
Yeah, I have a small flock of sheep, and they're run separately from the cows. I really haven't been able to figure out a way. I do run a few donkeys with the cows, and they've been really excellent. Because, you know, you're trying to always mimic nature. And I said, okay, what kind of animal can I put into my, actually around the horses. I mean, I tried to run just one herd at the ranch, putting beside that the sheep. But the sheep that we have is more for own consumption or for the grass-fed market. But the cows are run with the horses and with a few donkeys. And I think they do a much better job. The donkeys are pretty good at taking lower quality grasses, and they're good at protecting the herd.
Do any of our other panelists want to comment on running sheep with cattle? Okay, I'll just say that we do some of both. It depends on the circumstance and what we're trying to accomplish. There are times that the sheep are run with the cattle, and there are other times the sheep are run separately from the cattle. So it depends on our goals and objectives and what we're trying to accomplish at any particular point in time. The next question is from Rosemary. And Rosemary says, we harrow our cow pies in the spring. Is it better not to harrow and leave them whole, or to harrow and break them up?
Do you want to take that, Alan?
Okay, be happy to. So I'm not sure exactly where Rosemary is located, but this may be an area in the north where the cattle are more concentrated and fed in a concentrated sort of dry lot type situation or sacrifice pasture in the winter. And you may have a lot of cow pies that build up. In that case, it could be helpful to drag or harrow. However, during the active grazing season, then there should be no need whatsoever to do that. And if you remember the pictures that Alejandro showed you of the dung beetles, if you're able to build extensive dung beetle populations, then they do a great job of breaking up those manure pats within just a matter of a few days and reincorporating them into the soil. Likewise, if you run in multiple species, if you can run chickens behind the cattle or pigs behind the cattle, those chickens and pigs will also do a great job of breaking up manure pats. And likewise, if you're running higher stock densities, the cattle themselves will be walking through and tramping through those cow patties that they leave behind and stepping in them, spreading them out, that type of thing. So again, during the active grazing season, there should never be a need to do that. But if you are coming out of a winter where you've had them highly concentrated, that may be something that could be useful.
Hey,
The next
hey,
question.
Alan.
Yes, Doug.
I'm sorry. I was just going to throw in a little experience I had. An area that we had, it wasn't a lot. It was a pasture, but this was, 15 years ago when we were still feeding more hay. As an experiment, I went into that area, and we were using pretty good grazing management at the time. But I went into that area and I harrowed part of it once. I harrowed part of it twice, and part of it I didn't harrow at all. And by the middle of the summer, I couldn't tell the difference in any of them. So at that point, I never harrowed anything again.
Thank you, Doug. Very, very helpful.
And Alan, this is Ray. And just to add to what you guys are saying, and I think Doug proves it very well, that soil biota does that. These insects, these creatures, this diversity that we all talk about, they'll take care of it. The soil ecosystem will take care of that. And usually if you have a problem with that, it's also a good indicator to see if you're having poor soil function. And so if you're having a hard time breaking down, but notice what Doug did. He proved it to himself. And think about what you're doing with that harrow. You're using ancient sunlight, carbon, to diminish more carbon if you do a lot of soil surface disturbance. But those organisms will do it and take care of it.
Thank you, Ray. So Alejandro, the next question is from Curtis, and it is, how many feet does each solar panel power of the polywire?
Okay. So really it makes a lot of difference whether you're using this high tensile 12 gauge wire or you're using polywire. In our particular case, we use an energizer built locally by the Mennonite community. It's a 7 joule energizer. And we've been able to energize high tensile single wire for, now we're going to metric and English, 20 kilometers, 20 miles with no issues. Obviously, we put the energizer right in the middle. Polyvar, it's much less than that. And we ended up using a combination of like 80% of the fencing of the branch is high tensile, and the other 20% is polyvar, mostly to build alleys and centers around the water. But that's about, I mean, you have to buy, it's the same as the water. I mean, if you think you need a 5 joule energizer, you buy the 7 joule energizer. If you think you need a 2-inch pipe, you better buy a 3-inch pipe. So it's always better to have some margins there on that, on those areas. Now,
Thank you, Alejandro.
Sorry,
Go
let
ahead.
me just add this. Most of the failures in the electric fence is on the grounding system. So what we do, we actually use 3 rods and we water them every day, because you know this period environment is pretty dry and it needs some moisture on the grounding system.
Thank you. The next question is from Christopher, and Christopher says, I'm just starting out with my own operation in Colorado. How do you simulate this regenerative process with a much smaller piece of property, around 40 acres?
Okay, well, let me tell you, the most successful ranches that we have seen are the small ones. Why? Because you will end up building smaller paddocks, and it all goes back just to put even if you have a small herd, it just goes back to doing the math and putting the same minimal, let's say 10, 20,000 pounds on your best areas. So if we go to 100,000 acres, if we go to 10 acres, the principles are the same. It's the same and they're applicable the same. You go and select the best area, you put some density there, 10,000, 20,000, in small area, because you know there's a learning curve, so you don't really want to do it all at once because it's going to be, you're taking a much bigger risk. And then you completely rested that area for full growing season or whenever it depends on the rains. And you keep increasing from there. You keep growing from there, from going from the best areas to the worst areas. But it actually, the principles are the same. It's just that the fewer cattle you have, the smaller the paddocks are going to be.
Excellent. And just as a note to you and Kathy, we have a request from Nisha, working on a project in South America that will benefit from Alejandro's wisdom and experience. And would he be open to talking to her contact there? So just want to bring that to your attention, and Kathy, we can address that. Okay, so the next question is from Andrew. And Andrew asks, what would your fencing and grazing approach be in steep, moderately timbered, low rainfall terrain?
Okay. Yeah, originally our minds were very square. And we say, okay, on the planning side, we want everything like straight lines. Then we realize, see, if you see the ranch, there are like 3 different areas. I mean, there are more than 3, but in general, you have the Sierra or the mountain range, you have the hills, and you have the flats or the bottoms. So the productivity is different. And remember, we talk about not grazing the grass until it is on a boot stage or put a seed head, but it actually varies depending on the area. For example, in our ranch, we can graze twice the bottoms and only once the Sierra and the hills. Why so? Because, okay, we said, okay, don't graze this no early than this point. But also, you don't want to graze the grass when it's all oxidized. So the grass has like an expiration date. So you have a window where you have to graze that grass. Either not before because you want the roots fully developed, not this and not exceeding the rest periods, because then when you try to graze it, it's going to be all oxidized. And what's the nutritional value? Just zero. So what we have discovered is that in the Sierra and the hills, we can graze that like in 1.5 years or 2 years with no detrimental value, no detrimental nutritional value on the grass. And on the bottoms, we cannot really wait that long, because then the grass is going to tend to oxidize. So what we do is we graze once the bottoms, and then on the second pass, we graze the bottoms and the Sierra on the hills. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No, I think that was good. We are approaching 9:30, so I'm going to take 2 or 3 more questions, Alejandro, here. And then for those of you that are on, if we did not get to your question this evening, please email those to Kathy, and we will make sure that we get a response to your question. So we do want to get to all questions. So if we do not answer them this evening, we will get to those. Please just email those to Kathy. All right, so the next question, Alejandro, is pretty simple. It's how much time in years did it take you to see results from your change in management?
Okay. See, usually one of the first recommendations is if you have multiple herds, just try to make as few herds as possible. I mean, that's, if you're not going to do but just one big step, that's the one that you're going to make. But obviously, we need to properly raise the grasses. We need to intensify the grazing. But remember, it makes a whole difference when you have a mentor there. So if I did not have the mentors that I have, it's going to take me 10 years. And now we know more than before now. So whatever I did, I saw results like in 5 years. Now it's going to take me 3 years. And actually one of our main goals with people that we work, even friends or customers, is for them to get results on the first year. And that's why we prioritize areas where we're going to work.
Excellent. The next question is from Timothy, and Timothy asks, what conception rates are you getting with your herd at this point, and what was your historical average? And Alejandro, you and I have talked about this a lot of times. I would like for you, in answering this, to also talk about your economics and how they have improved relative to all of these other measures.
Yeah, right now our consumption rate is about 75%. Now that's just one single number. So what would it take me to go from, let's say, 75% to 90%? And that's what we really need to work on it. Is it worth it for me to increase that 15%? At what cost? I mean, it's not only money, but also your lifestyle, how often you want to move, and so on. And also, we're moving twice a day, and that really doesn't mean that we're always like slaves on what we're doing. I have 2 people working on over 1,000 animals, and it really, I mean, that's why it's so important for you to build a good water system, because in these brutal environments, you're going to realize that most of the time is thinking and working on maintaining and planning the water system. So if we're going to spend some money on good quality products, it has to be on the water system. So if the water system is in place, then you really need very few people. Now, we also strive to have a very low cost production model. So right now, it costs us about $200 to carry a cow per year. Now, some people may say, yeah, but in Mexico, the labor is much cheaper. Well, the labor is only at like $20 per cow. So it really doesn't really make much of a difference. Now, the average in the region is probably like a 50% calving rate. Now, also you have to consider that we're carrying 3 more times cattle per acre. So that's like almost like multiplying that 75% by 3. So you ended up with a 200% pregnancy rate compared to the neighbors. I don't know if you want to add something, Alan, or I'm missing something there.
No, I think you covered that very well, and you made the critical point that it's not about chasing the highest conception rates and pregnancy rates. It is about economic thresholds. And oftentimes what we find is that, pregnancy rates that are a little lower are actually the most economically viable. I did more than 15 years worth of work looking at what we call IRM, Integrated Resources Management data. And we found that in more temperate regions, even, you're in a very brittle environment, but in more temperate regions, the most profitable cow-calf producers were those that were around 85 to 88% pregnancy rate, whereas most in those regions are pushing for a 92, 95% or so. So the last question this evening, Alejandro.
Alan,
yes.
just give me a parenthesis. I mean, that doesn't mean that 70%, 75% that we're getting is going to remain there. Remember that we are in a continuous improvement. So as we improve the grasses, as we improve the genetics, we're going to increase that with those pregnancy rates. That's the beauty of this holistic plant grazing management, adaptive grazing, that you're improving every day. If we don't do it that way, we're just going downwards every day. More inputs, fewer cows pregnant, and so on.
Absolutely. So the last question this evening, Alejandro, is you mentioned that you do not graze until plants have a seed head. Is this in order to help spread seed to areas that need more plant density and areas that you are regenerating? If so, how do you manage your herd moves to achieve this?
Yeah, I think the key there is we could potentially chase that optimal point of grazing, but remember that we're in a very large area, so it will be impractical to say, oh yeah, it rained on 10 miles from here and we go there, or we rain. So we keep going and just being very flexible on the times. Now there will be areas that you're gonna graze before time, but the key there is not to graze the same area at the same time of the year, every year. So the key here is, for some areas, you're gonna graze a little bit earlier, some others a little bit late, but it will kind of average through the years. And if you keep an eye, then you're gonna see that it will improve. And the bottom line of that is to promote those grasses that are better perennial grasses to get a good stand or a good chance of fully develop. Because if we graze several times per year, we ended up with almost a monoculture of perennial grasses.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. And again, we deeply appreciate your presentation this evening and your generosity in answering all of these questions. And once again, I want to remind everybody of the upcoming webinar on October the 6th at 7 p.m. Central Time, Six-Legged Stewards, presented by Ralph Washington Jr. So thank you, everyone. Again, if we did not get to your questions, please submit those to Kathy and we'll make sure that we get those answered. So we will sign off now, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.